The wedding invitation from Clare Jensen lit up my phone screen while I was crouched on the curb, smoking. Gold digital foil, elegant script. Pity the groom's name wasn't mine. I stared at the unfamiliar name for a full 10 minutes. Then I opened our message thread, typed, and deleted. Typed and deleted. In the end, all I sent was, "Congrats. I'll be there." The second it sent, I unsent the message I'd saved in drafts for 10 years, the one I never had the guts to send. Don't marry him. Please. The cigarette burned down to my fingertips, the pain making me flinch. I stayed crouched on the curb, watching my phone screen slowly dim until it went completely black, reflecting my own worn-out face. Only then did I realize the sky had gone completely dark. The early summer evening still had a chill to it, the wind making me pull my neck into my collar. A sharp, stinging pain throbbed where the cherry of the cigarette had seared my skin. I flicked the butt away and crushed it under my heel. My phone buzzed again, the screen flaring back to life. It was Claire. It said you were typing for a while there, trying to figure out how to tell me my fiancé is handsome. Winking face. I read the words, a knot tightening in my throat. I want another cigarette, but when I patted my pockets, the pack was empty. Yeah, he is. I typed back. Way better looking than me. That part was true. From the photo, the guy had a square jaw, a clean-cut look, and a suit that probably cost more than my rent. He wasn't the kind of guy you'd find smoking on a curb. We weren't from the same world. She sent back a laughing emoji. Of course he is. I picked him. The date's the 16th of next month. The Monarch Hotel. Dress sharp, don't embarrass me. Oh, and bring a +1. I want to see what kind of saint finally managed to wrangle you. I stared at the words +1, my eyelid twitching. You got it, I replied. Wouldn't miss it. After sending that, I shoved my phone in my pocket and pushed myself up. I'd been squatting for too long, and my legs were numb, nearly sending me stumbling. I limped my way back toward my rental. The streetlights stretched my shadow long and thin, like some lonely ghost. My head was a mess, full of old memories. Claire and I grew up running wild together. Our families lived across the hall from each other. My dad and hers were army buddies, the kind of bond forged in hell. When we were kids, she was my shadow. Everywhere I went, she followed. When I climbed trees to raid birds' nests, she was my lookout below. When I waded into the creek to catch fish, she'd be on the bank holding my sneakers. When a neighborhood bully from the next block cornered me, she was the one who grabbed a loose brick and threatened to bash his head in. Her dad strung her up for it later, but even then, she never gave me up. Then we grew up. She blossomed, turning from a scruffy-haired tomboy into the girl everyone in the neighborhood watched. The line of guys trying to ask her out could have stretched to the main road. And me? I was still the same screw-up. Bottom of the class, top of the list for starting fights. The only thing that hadn't changed was that she was still closer to me than anyone. After late-night study sessions in high school, she'd always take forever to pack her bag, just so we could ride our bikes home together. She claimed she was scared of the dark, but the entire route was lit up like a Christmas tree. Her bike was always breaking down. The chain would slip, or a tire would go flat. It wasn't until later that I found out she was sabotaging it herself, just for an excuse to sit on the back of my bike, her fingers lightly gripping the hem of my jacket. The wind would carry the scent of her shampoo, some kind of light jasmine, right to me. Back then, I wished that road would go on forever. But roads always have an end. The SATs were a continental divide, washing us onto different shores. I barely scraped my way into a third-rate state college nearby. She got a full ride to a top-tier university 1,000 miles away in Chicago. The day I dropped her off at the bus station, her eyes were red and puffy. "Ethan," she'd asked, her voice thick, "are you going to come visit me?" "Duh. Of course," I'd said, messing up her perfectly styled ponytail. "Just hit the books. Don't get into trouble." She nodded, looking back over and over as she walked through the gate. When the bus pulled away, I felt like a huge piece of me had been hollowed out, ripped away by that steel box on wheels. For 4 years of college, we lived on texts and phone calls. At first, she told me everything. Which professor was hilarious, which roommate was driving her crazy. Then, gradually, she started sharing less. The things she talked about were all things I didn't understand: club activities, coding competitions, academic conferences. And strange names started popping up more and more. Like a senior named Mark. I knew we were changing. Her world was getting bigger and bigger, while mine was still the size of Pinhole. After graduation, she stayed in that glittering metropolis, Chicago. Landed a great job at a multinational corporation, a bright future ahead of her. I went back to our small hometown, pulled some strings to get a dead-end job at a dying company, and just drifted. Our contact went from several times a day to a few times a week to a few times a month. Eventually, it was just the generic, mass-sent holiday greetings. And on her birthday, every year, I'd send a happy birthday right at midnight. She'd reply, "Thanks, you too." Even though my birthday was 3 months later, I knew we were over. It was destined to happen the moment she left our little town. I just never thought the end would feel so tangible. As tangible as a blood-red invitation with a stranger's name on it. I pushed open the door to my apartment. The smell of stale takeout and cigarette smoke hit me. I didn't bother turning on the light, just threw myself onto the sofa. In the darkness, my phone screen lit up one more time. I picked it up. It was a link from Claire to their Zola wedding page. The cover photo was her and that guy. She was in a white dress, a brilliant, happy smile on her face. The man had his arm around her waist, looking down at her with tender eyes. A perfect couple, made for each other. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I got up, walked over to my desk, and unlocked the bottom drawer. Nothing valuable inside, just a bunch of old junk. On top was a rusty tin box. I opened it. Inside was a chaotic jumble of trinkets. Glass marbles, the arm of a transformer, a few faded cartoon stickers, and a crumpled candy wrapper. I picked up the wrapper, bringing it to my nose. It didn't smell like anything anymore. Too much time had passed. Even the sweetness had evaporated. It was from 5th grade. I had a fever and stayed home from school. She came over to check on me after classes. She pulled a handful of Jolly Ranchers from her pocket and pressed them into my hand. "Here," she'd said, "eat these. You'll feel better." I unwrapped one and popped in my mouth. It was so damn sweet. Later, I secretly saved the wrapper. I'd kept it for over a decade. I thought I'd forgotten all about it. Turns out I hadn't. The thing was still here. The person who gave it to me was getting married. I carefully smoothed out the wrapper and placed it back in the tin box. I closed the lid and locked it back in the drawer. After all that, I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked up at the man in the mirror, face dripping, eyes a little red. "Ethan," I said to myself, "it's time to fucking wake up." The next few days passed in a haze. Work, home, smoke, drink. Occasionally, I'd scroll through Instagram and see Claire's posts about wedding planning. Trying on dresses, picking out favors, updates on their new condo. I look at every post over and over, but I never liked or commented. A lurker hiding in the shadows. She'd slide in my DMs sometimes. "Ethan, I picked out your groomsmen tux. Sent you the measurements form. Let me know if it's wrong." "Got it. Remember to get here a day early for the rehearsal." Okay. The conversations were short, polite, and carried a distance that felt impossible to cross. I knew she was trying to maintain that last little thread between us, making it seem natural. I played along, performing my role as the childhood best friend. But somewhere deep inside, there was always a dull ache. With half a month to go before the wedding, I took my vacation days and bought a train ticket back home. I didn't tell her. I needed to go back and see it. See what had become of the place where we grew up. The train chugged north, the scenery outside the window shifting from skyscrapers to low-slung houses, and finally to endless fields. The familiar feeling slowly returned. When I got off the train and breathed in the familiar, slightly dusty air of my hometown, the knot in my chest just got tighter. I didn't go to my parents' house. I went straight to the old neighborhood. It had been torn down long ago. A few shiny new condo buildings stood in its place. The old locust tree we used to climb, the little creek where we caught minnows, the coal pile where we played hide-and-seek. All gone. I stood at the entrance to the new development, feeling lost. You can't go home again, I guess. That's what this felt like. "Ethan? Is that you, Ethan?" A vaguely familiar voice came from behind me. I turned to see a middle-aged woman pushing a stroller. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place the name. "It's me, Mrs. Henderson. I used to live downstairs from you." She came closer, her face beaming. My, haven't you grown into a handsome young man?" I gave an awkward smile. "Mrs. Henderson, it's been a long time, hasn't it? We've barely seen you since your parents moved." She looked me over, then glanced at my empty hands. "Back for something special?" Yeah, just looking around," I mumbled. "You're back for Claire, aren't you?" Mrs. Henderson said, a knowing look on her face. "That girl's wedding is tomorrow, you know? She's really done our old neighborhood proud, finding such a wonderful man. I hear his family owns a big company." I didn't really hear what else she said. All I caught were the words, "Wedding is tomorrow." Tomorrow? Not the 16th of next month. My mind went blank. I quickly pulled out my phone and found the Evite. The date was printed clear as day. The 21st of this month. Tomorrow. I thought it was next month. God damn it, I got the date wrong. Claire's father was just talking about you the other day, wondering why Ethan hadn't come back yet. Mrs. Henderson was still rambling. I cut her off. "Mrs. Henderson, I just remembered something urgent came up. I have to go. Without waiting for another word, I practically ran from the development. I found a quiet corner and immediately called Claire. It rang for a long time before she picked up. Hello, Ethan. It was noisy on her end. Sounded like a lot of people. Where? Where are you? I asked, my voice tight. At home. My parents' place. Tomorrow's the big day, so tons of relatives are here today. It's a madhouse, she said, her voice full of laughter. She sounded happy. So, the wedding. It's tomorrow. Yeah, it was on the eve. What's wrong? She paused, her tone shifting to confusion. Don't tell me you got the date wrong. I was silent. My silence was the only answer she needed. The other end of the line went quiet for a few seconds. Then I heard her take a deep breath. Ethan, her voice turned cold. Were you even planning on coming? No, I wanted to explain, but I didn't know where to start. Was I supposed to tell her that I was so scared to face it that my subconscious deliberately screwed up the date? I bought the wrong ticket, I said, using the lamest excuse I could think of. I thought it was next month. Ah, she let out a cold laugh. Next month? Ethan, did you even look at the invitation I sent? I'm sorry, Forget it. Don't say anything. Her voice was heavy with disappointment. Come or don't. It's up to you. She hung up. Listening to the dial tone, I just stood there, my chest feeling heavy and tight like it was stuffed with wet cotton. What the hell was I doing? Was I going to screw up even this last shred of decency between us? I squatted down on the curb, lit a cigarette, and took a hard drag. The nicotine helped clear my foggy head a little. What now? The first flight out? Even if I made it, I'd show up a dusty mess, without even a decent change of clothes. Was I going to embarrass her? Besides, she was obviously pissed. Me showing up now would only make things more awkward. But if I didn't go, I might never see her again. I'd never see her in a wedding dress. Even if the groom wasn't me. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes, to see her looking her most beautiful. Once that thought took root, it grew like a weed, choking out everything else. To hell with decency. To hell with awkwardness. I was going. I stubbed out the cigarette, stood up, and hailed a cab. The airport, please. On the way, I searched for flights on my phone. The next one to Chicago was at 11 p.m. I'd land around 2 in the morning, just in time for the wedding tomorrow. I bought the ticket, then called my boss to ask for a few more days off. He chewed me out over the phone, but finally agreed. After sorting that out, I leaned back against the seat and watched the scenery fly by. The town had changed a lot, but you could still see ghosts of the old days. The streets Claire and I had walked down together, the corner store where we bought candy, the awning we hid under during a sudden downpour. Scene after scene played out in my head like an old movie. I knew that going there probably wouldn't change anything. It might even make me look like a bigger fool. But I had to go. I had to witness, with my own eyes, the final death of my youth. I got to the airport, got my boarding pass, went through security. Everything went smoothly. Sitting in the terminal, I watched the people around me. Businessmen on trips, families on vacation, couples saying tearful goodbyes. And then there was me, a lost soul, heading to a self-imposed execution for a ridiculous reason. When the plane took off, my ears ached from the pressure change. I watched the city lights shrink below, feeling strangely calm. I almost wanted to laugh. Ethan, you're an idiot. A complete and utter idiot. But hey, you've got to be an idiot a few times in life to make it complete, right? It was after 2 in the morning when the plane landed. The air in Chicago was humid and warm, a stark contrast to the dry, cool nights back home. I walked out of the airport with just a backpack, got a cab, and gave the driver the address for the hotel Claire had sent me. The Monarch Hotel. Just from the name, I knew it was the kind of place I'd normally never set foot in. The taxi pulled up to the entrance, and a doorman in a crisp uniform opened the door for me. I looked at him, then down at my own wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, and felt a little out of place. Thanks, I muttered, hurrying into the lobby. Even in the middle of the night, the lobby was brightly lit, though mostly empty. The receptionist had a professional smile plastered on her face. Good evening, sir. Checking in. I'm looking for Miss Clare Jensen, who's having her wedding here tomorrow. I hesitated. Or the groom, Mr. Peterson. Are you a guest for the wedding, sir? May I have your name? My last name is Shaw. Ethan Shaw. The receptionist typed something into her computer, and her smile widened. Mr. Shaw, of course. The bride and groom have reserved rooms for their out-of-town guests. I'll get you checked in. Thanks. With the key card in hand, I took the elevator up. The room was on the 18th floor, a standard king. It was nice, a world away from my dump of a rental. I took a shower, trying to wash off the grime and exhaustion of the trip. The hot water stung my skin, but my mind was clearer than ever. Tomorrow. It was all happening tomorrow. I lay down on the bed and forced myself to try to sleep. But I just tossed and turned. In the end, I just stared at the ceiling until the first hints of dawn crept into the room. I was up at 6. I put on the only decent suit I owned. I'd bought it last year for a cousin's wedding. It was a little wrinkled. I used the hot water kettle in the bathroom to steam it a bit. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than a t-shirt. At 7:30, I went down to the ballroom where the wedding was being held. The area outside was already decorated. A huge photo of the couple on an easel, an archway of flowers, and staff in uniform bustling about. The welcome sign listed the names of the bride and groom: Mr. Mark Peterson and Miss Clare Jensen. I stared at his name for a long time. Mark. It sounded so solid, so right for a husband. Not like my name, Ethan, which always felt a little sharp, a little distant. Ethan. A familiar voice sounded behind me. My body went rigid. I slowly turned around. Claire was standing there in a simple silk robe, her hair pinned up casually. She had makeup on, but hadn't had her hair styled yet. She looked at me, her expression a complex mix of surprise, confusion, and was that a flicker of relief. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Just came down to look around," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a few steps closer, looking me up and down. "You got in last night? Why didn't you tell me?" "It was late. Didn't want to wake you," I said. The air between us felt thick. It was like we'd suddenly run out of things to say. The easy familiarity we used to have was gone, completely vanished. "Well, congratulations," I managed to say again, my voice dry. "Thanks." She bit her lip. "Have you had breakfast?" "Not yet. Let's go grab something. The hotel buffet is pretty good," she said. "I haven't eaten either." I nodded. I followed her toward the restaurant. She walked half a step ahead of me, the belt of her robe swaying gently with each step. I could smell the faint scent of makeup and shampoo on her, a different fragrance from the jasmine I remembered. There weren't many people in the restaurant, mostly family and friends here for the wedding. A few of the older guests smiled and greeted her as we walked in, their eyes glancing at me with curiosity. She smiled back, but didn't introduce me. We found a table by the window. She went to get food, and I followed. The spread was impressive, a mix of everything, but I had no appetite. I just got a bowl of oatmeal and a hard-boiled egg. She didn't take much either, a plate of fruit and a glass of milk. We sat down and ate in silence. The awkwardness was suffocating. "So, you came alone?" she finally asked. "No plus one." My hand holding the spoon paused. "Yeah, just me," I said. "No one to bring." She just said, "Oh," and went back to poking at a slice of melon with her fork. "Your fiancé." I started, trying to find something to talk about. "What's he like?" The moment I said it, I wanted to kick myself. What kind of stupid question was that? She looked up at me, a strange glint in her eyes. "He's great," she said. "He's really good to me. Stable. That's good." I nodded, going back to my oatmeal. It was hot, scalding my tongue. "What about you?" she asked. "How have you been these past few years?" Same old," I said. "Just getting by. Still at the same company?" "Yeah. Ever think about a change?" "Nah." The conversation was excruciating. Every word felt like it was being pried out of stone. I knew it wasn't her fault. I was the one who had walked myself into this dead end. I was the one who had let the distance between us grow this vast. After breakfast, she had to go back to get her hair and makeup finished. "I'll wait for you," I said. She nodded and turned to leave. I watched her back as she disappeared through the restaurant doors, feeling an emptiness settle in my stomach. The ceremony was set to start at 9:18 a.m. I found a seat in the ballroom 10 minutes early. The room was already filled with people, a sea of formal wear, and the buzz of happy chatter. I found an empty chair at a table near the back corner. It seemed to be a table for the groom's friends. I didn't recognize a single person. They were all talking business, cars, kids. I couldn't contribute, and I didn't want to. I just sat there quietly, watching the huge LED screen at the front of the room, which was cycling through their engagement photos. At 9:18 sharp, the wedding began. The music swelled, and the officiant delivered a passionate opening. Then, the groom, Mark Peterson, walked onto the stage. He was wearing a black tuxedo, tall and straight, a confident smile on his face. He really did look the part. The room erupted in applause. Then, the main doors to the ballroom slowly swung open. A single spotlight cut through the dimness. Claire stood in the light, her arm linked through her father's. The entire ballroom fell silent. She was beautiful, so beautiful it didn't seem real, like a princess from a fairy tale. I watched her take slow, deliberate steps down the aisle, toward the stage, toward the man who was about to become her husband. Her face was alight with a happy, shy smile. Her gaze never left Mark. I sat in my corner, an irrelevant spectator, watching her glide down the red carpet past my table. So close, yet a universe away. I knew, in that moment, that she was truly, completely gone from my world. The ceremony proceeded as planned. Exchanging rings, reciting vows, the kiss. Every step was met with applause and blessings. I clapped along with everyone else, my palms slick with sweat. The officiant tried to liven things up with a few jokes. The guests laughed, but I was an outsider, completely detached from the joyous atmosphere. After the ceremony, the newlyweds left to change for the reception. The dinner service began. Waiters started bringing out plates, and my table mates began to eat and chat. I had no appetite, just picked at my food for show, but I drank plenty of the wine. Soon enough, it was time for the toasts. Claire had changed into a stunning red dress that made her even more radiant. Mark was by her side, holding a glass, effortlessly charming. They made their way from table to table. Closer and closer to mine. My heart started to beat faster. Finally, they arrived at our table. Everyone stood up, offering congratulations. I stood up with them, raising my glass. "Thank you all so much for coming today," Mark said with a smile, his eyes scanning the table. When his gaze landed on me, he paused for a second, a flicker of non-recognition in his eyes. Claire gently nudged him and whispered, "This is Ethan Shaw, my best friend from home." "Oh, Ethan, great to meet you." Mark's smile was instantly warm and welcoming. "Claire talks about you all the time. Says you two grew up together, thick as thieves." Talked about me all the time? I was surprised and glanced at Claire. Her eyes were lowered, her face fixed in a polite smile. I couldn't read her at all. "Congratulations." I raised my glass, clinking it first with Mark's, then turning to Claire. "To you both, for a long and happy life." "Thank you." She met my eyes for a fraction of a second before looking away. The glasses chimed. I tipped my head back and downed the entire glass of whiskey. The burn went straight from my throat to my stomach. "Wow, you can hold your liquor," Mark said with a laugh. He finished his own glass, then thoughtfully said to Claire, "You just take a sip, honey." Claire took a small, delicate sip. "Well, we've got to get to the next table," Mark said politely, placing a hand on the small of Claire's back and guiding her away. From start to finish, Claire never looked at me again. I sat back down, feeling like all the strength had been drained from my body. The others at the table went back to their food and conversation, oblivious to my state. Only I knew that those few seconds had taken everything I had. The wedding continued, loud and festive. To me, it was just noise. I sat for a little while longer, then got up and left the ballroom. I went outside and found a spot on the edge of a planter, lighting a cigarette. The sunlight was bright, making my eyes ache. The pressure in my chest was immense, like a giant stone was sitting on it. I finished one cigarette and immediately lit another. Hiding out here, a voice came from behind me. I turned to see Claire, standing a few feet away. She had changed out of the red dress and was now in a simple sundress of the same color. She looked tired. It was getting stuffy in there. Needed some air. I put out my cigarette. She came over and sat down next to me, leaving a small space between us. "When are you leaving?" she asked. "Afternoon train." "So soon?" "Yeah, I don't have many vacation days left." Another silence settled between us. The breeze carried the scent of flowers and damp earth. "Today. Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course." I stared at the ground. "Honestly," she hesitated, "I didn't think you would." I managed a small smile, but said nothing. I hadn't thought I would either. "Ethan," she said my name, her tone suddenly serious. "There's something I've always wanted to ask you." My chest tightened. "What?" Back then, she looked me straight in the eye, the day I left for college at the bus station. "Was there something you wanted to say to me?" I froze. My mind shot back to that sweltering summer day. The noise of the station, the hiss of the bus's air brakes. Her with her red-rimmed eyes, looking back at me again and again. There was something I wanted to say, words that had reached my lips, but were swallowed back down. It was "don't go," or maybe "wait for me," or something else. It had been so long, I couldn't even remember for sure. "No," I heard myself say. There was nothing. She stared at me for several long seconds. Then, the corner of her mouth pulled into a faint, bitter smile. "I knew it," she said softly, almost to herself. "Knew what?" I asked. "Knew that's what you'd say." She stood up, brushing off her dress. "Let's go back inside. It's too hot out here." "Okay." I walked behind her back toward the hotel. Watching the slender line of her back, a powerful impulse surged through me. To say something, do something, anything to break this suffocating, hopeless situation. But what could I say? What could I do? Tell her I've always been in love with you, since we were kids in diapers? Beg her not to marry him, to run away with a broke loser like me? It was laughable. Even I thought it was laughable. And besides, it was too late. She was a married woman now. Just moments ago, in front of all those witnesses. I had missed my chance. No, I never even had a chance. The moment she got into that university and I stayed behind in our small town, The chance had vanished. I just hadn't been willing to admit it. Back in the ballroom, the wedding was winding down. Guests were starting to leave. It was time for me to go too. I went up to my room, grabbed my bag, and waited for a cab by the hotel entrance. Claire and Mark were there, seeing guests off. When Mark saw me with my bag, he walked over. "Leaving so soon, Ethan? Why don't you stay for a couple more days?" "Can't. Got work," I said. "All right then. Safe travels. Next time you're in town, give us a call. We'll show you a good time," Mark said, clapping me on the shoulder in that generic, friendly way. "Thanks." I looked past him to Claire. She was looking at me, her expression placid, unreadable. "I'm heading out," I said to her. "Okay. Be safe," she nodded. My cab arrived. I opened the door and got in. Just before I closed it, I took one last look at her. She was standing next to Mark, a splash of red like a burning flame. So bright and so far away. The car pulled away from the hotel. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. I was tired, more tired than I had ever been in my life. My heart felt hollow, like something essential had been surgically removed. I knew this was really the end. My youth, my messy, one-sided love, all my unrealistic fantasies. It was all over. My phone vibrated. I took it out. It was a message from Claire. Just 3 words. "I am sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, I slowly typed a single question mark and hit send. She replied quickly. "For a lot of things. For pushing you to come visit me back then. For sending you the invitation when I knew. For asking you that stupid question today." I looked at the screen, my nose starting to burn. "It's fine," I typed back. "It's all in the past." After it sent, I turned off my phone. I leaned my head against the window, watching the city blur past. This city was prosperous and beautiful, but it had nothing to do with me. I was just a traveler passing through. I'd come to attend a feast that belonged to someone else. Now, the feast was over. It was time for me to return to my own gray, dusty world. When the train pulled out of the station, I didn't look back. Some roads, you can only travel forward. There's no going back. Back in my small town, life fell back into its old rhythm. Work, home, eat, sleep. A stagnant pond with no ripples. Except sometimes in the dead of night, I'd think about that wedding. About her in that white dress. About her last message, "I am sorry." A dull ache would still surface in my chest. But after a while, the pain just became numbness. Time is the best painkiller, even if it works slowly. I try not to look at her social media, eventually muting her stories and posts. Out of sight, out of mind. I'd occasionally hear news about her from my parents. That she was pregnant. That she'd had a baby girl. That she seemed to be doing well. I just grunt in response, not feeling much of anything. It seemed I'd really moved on. Until that day. It was a normal Saturday afternoon. I was sleeping in when my phone started ringing insistently. I answered it, half asleep. "Hello, Ethan. It's me." It was Claire's voice on the other end, thick with tears. I was instantly awake, sitting bolt upright in bed. "Claire, what's wrong?" I'm downstairs," she sobbed. "Can you come down?" I was stunned. Downstairs from my apartment? I ran to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked down. Sure enough, a strange car was parked by the curb, and standing next to it was a figure in a beige trench coat. It was Claire. What was she doing back here? At my place. "Stay there. I'm coming right down." I hung up, threw on some clothes, and bolted down the stairs. When I reached her, I could see that her eyes were swollen and her face was pale. She looked like she'd lost a lot of weight. "What happened?" I asked, trying to catch my breath. When she saw me, the tears started falling faster. "Ethan, I have nowhere else to go," she choked out. My heart sank. "Let's go upstairs first." I took the small suitcase from her hand and led her up to my apartment. My place was a mess, with a blanket still unfolded on the couch. I felt a pang of embarrassment and quickly cleared a space for her. "Sit down. Have some water." I poured her a glass of lukewarm water. She held the glass, her fingers turning white from gripping it so hard. Tears streamed silently down her face. I sat across from her, my mind racing. What the hell had happened? A terrible feeling started to creep in. Is it Mark?" I asked tentatively. Her head snapped up, her eyes filled with pain and rage. "He cheated on me," she said, the words practically ground out between her teeth. Even though I'd half expected it, hearing it out loud was still a shock. That stable, reliable-looking guy from the wedding? The man she said was so good to me? When did this happen? I tried to keep my voice calm. "It's been going on for over 6 months, she said with a bitter laugh. "With a new intern at his company. Just graduated. Young and pretty. How did you find out?" "He never let me touch his phone. He was always working late, always had commitments on the weekends. It was just a woman's intuition, I guess." I started getting suspicious. Then, I found a used condom in his car. Her body was trembling as she spoke. A white-hot anger flared up inside me. That son of a bitch. I confronted him. He denied it at first, but when I showed him the proof, he just went silent, she said, wiping at her tears. He said he was sorry, but he said he was serious about the other girl. He begged me to let them be together. Fuck. I couldn't stop myself from swearing. My parents don't know. I can't tell them. She looked at me, her eyes as helpless as a child's. I have our daughter, and I didn't know where to go. I just started driving, and somehow, I ended up here. She started crying again. Watching her shoulders shake with sobs, my heart felt like it was being stabbed with 1,000 needles. The Claire I knew was always proud, always bright. When had she ever been this broken, this vulnerable? That bastard. How dare he do this to her? You can stay here for now, I said. Don't think about anything else. Just get some rest. She looked up, her eyes blurry with tears. Won't it be too much trouble for you? Don't be ridiculous, I scowled. Since when do we have to talk like that? She looked down. Thank you, she whispered. I cleaned up my bedroom and told her to take the bed. I'd sleep on the couch. I went to the corner store and bought some simple groceries, then made her a bowl of ramen. She must have been starving because she ate the whole thing. After she ate, her emotions seemed to stabilize a bit. I washed the dishes and came back into the living room to find her curled up on the couch, hugging her knees, staring out the window. The last rays of sunset cast a soft glow on her, making her look even more lonely and fragile. Where's your daughter? I asked. With his mother, she said quietly. She's watching her for now. I nodded and didn't press further. Asking about that now would just be pouring salt on the wound. What are you planning to do next? I asked carefully. She shook her head, her eyes vacant. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. She pulled at the corner of her mouth. Pathetic, right? The moment a man is gone, I don't even know how to function. Don't say that. My own throat felt tight. He doesn't deserve you. She didn't reply, just buried her face in her knees. After a moment, I heard her muffled sobs. I sat next to her, wanted to pat her on the back, to comfort her, but I stopped myself. Any words of comfort would be useless right now. All I could do was give her a place to stay, and be here for her. I waited until she had cried herself out and grew quiet. Night had fallen completely. Go take a shower and get some sleep, I said. We can figure things out tomorrow. She nodded and went in the bathroom. Listening to the sound of the shower, my mind was a tangled mess. I never, ever imagined we would meet again like this, in my crappy little apartment, for such a humiliating reason. Fate has a sixth sense of humor. A little while later, she came out of the bathroom wearing an old t-shirt of mine that I'd found for her. The oversized shirt made her look even smaller and more frail. I'm going to bed, she said quietly. Good night. Good night. I watched her go into the bedroom and close the door. I lay down on the couch, but sleep was miles away. My head was spinning. I felt furious for her, for the injustice of it all. And underneath that, a tiny, shameful flicker of relief. Relief that she was back. No, Ethan, you can't think like that. She's hurt. She needs help. This isn't an opportunity. Besides, you two ended a long time ago. The moment she walked down that aisle, it was over for good. Right now, you're just a friend. A childhood friend, giving her a place to crash. That's it. I forced my eyes shut and started counting sheep. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. I lost count somewhere in the hundreds before I finally started to drift off. In that hazy state before sleep, I thought I heard a faint crying sound from the bedroom. Suppressed, hopeless. My heart clenched in pain. Claire. Just before dawn, I finally fell into a deep sleep. It didn't last long. I was woken by a slight noise from the kitchen. I sat up and saw Claire, wearing my apron, busy at the stove. The morning light streamed through the window, outlining her in a soft glow. The scene felt unreal, like a dream. Did I wake you? She turned around, looking a little embarrassed. I was just trying to make some breakfast. It's fine. I rubbed my face. I'm usually up around this time anyway. I went to the bathroom to wash up. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, 2 dark circles under my eyes. I splashed my face with cold water. Wake up, Ethan. Get a grip. When I came out, the table was set with oatmeal, fried eggs, and some bagels from the bakery downstairs. Simple but steaming hot. It's not much, she said, taking off the apron. I'm out of practice. It's great. I sat down and took a sip of my coffee. It was the perfect temperature. We ate our breakfast in silence. The atmosphere was a little less tense than yesterday, but there was still a careful, tentative quality to it. Any plans for today? I asked. She shook her head. I don't know. Maybe. I should probably go check out of the hotel room. She must have gotten a room before coming to my place. I'll go with you, I said. She glanced at me, but didn't refuse. Okay. After breakfast, I drove her to the hotel. We didn't talk much on the way. She just stared out the window, her profile looking thin and fragile in the morning light. Checking out was easy. Back in the car, she stared at the keycard in her hand, lost in thought. Where to next? I asked. Could you take me somewhere? She asked softly. Where? Our old high school. I was a little surprised but nodded. Okay. We drove to the east side of town. The high school was still in the same place, but the building had been renovated and the walls had a fresh coat of paint. It was the weekend, so the campus was mostly empty except for a few custodians. We signed in with the security guard and went inside. The track, the main building, the cafeteria, the layout was the same, but all the details were different. We walked slowly along the running track. Used to skip class to play basketball right here, she said suddenly. Yeah, I smiled. And you'd be sitting in the bleachers over there pretending to do homework, but actually watching me. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Who said I was watching you? You know you were. The mood lightened a little. We walked around to the back of the main building, where the old oak tree still stood, its branches thick with leaves. Remember this? She pointed to a faint carving on the trunk. You carved this. I leaned in to look. It was carved so deep that the bark had grown around it over the years, warping the letters, but I could still make out a C. Next to it, a smaller. I'd carved it on the night of our high school graduation, sneaking back onto campus. I thought I was so cool back then. Looking at it now, it just seemed stupid. You still remember that? I said. Yeah, she said, her fingers tracing the old scar in the bark. I came back to see it a few times after that. Something stirred in my chest. Ethan, she turned, leaning her back against the tree and looking at me. And this is just a hypothetical, but if back at the bus station that day, you had said what you wanted to say, do you think things would have turned out differently? I looked at her. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows across her face. Her eyes were bright, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. She'd asked this before. On her wedding day. I'd chickened out then, said there was nothing to say. Now, there didn't seem to be any point in hiding anymore. Yeah, maybe I said. She didn't seem to expect such a direct answer, and blinked in surprise. What were you going to say? She asked. Don't go, or wait for me, something like that. I gave a weak smile. Probably just some useless, dramatic bullshit. She fell silent. After a long moment, she said softly, it wouldn't have been useless. The wind whispered through the leaves. We stood side by side, leaning against the old oak tree, just like we used to when we were kids. You know, I regretted it later, she said suddenly. Regretted what? Regretted going to college, so far away. Regretted not fighting for it a little harder. She smiled, but it was a bitter smile. Is that just how people are? The things you can't have, the things you've already lost. Those are always the best. Maybe, I said, a tightness in my chest. What was the point of saying all this now? You can't turn back time. Let's go, she said, pushing herself off the tree. Let's head back. On the drive back, she talked more. She told me funny stories from college, embarrassing moments from her first job. She deliberately avoided any mention of Mark. I knew she was trying hard to act normal. I played along, cracking jokes here and there. It felt like we were back to how we used to be, able to talk about anything. But we both knew, deep down, that something was fundamentally different. Once a crack forms, no matter how well you patch it, the scar is always there. For the next few days, Claire stayed at my place. She didn't cry anymore, and she didn't mention Mark. During the day, while I was at work, she would read or go for walks. When I came home in the evening, she'd have a simple dinner ready. It felt almost like we were playing house. But we were both careful to maintain our distance. We rarely touched, and our conversations carefully skirted any sensitive topics. A strange, unspoken agreement hung between us. I knew the situation was wrong. It was a sandcastle, waiting for the tide to come in, but I didn't say anything to break the spell. I was greedy for this sliver of counterfeit warmth, even if it was only temporary. On Friday night, we were on the couch watching some mindless reality TV show when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her face instantly changed. It was Mark. She stared at the phone, her thumb hovering over the answer button, trembling slightly. You should answer it, I said. You have to face it eventually. She took a deep breath, swiped to answer, and put the call on speaker. Hello. Her voice was ice. Claire. Mark's voice sounded exhausted, and I could hear the slur of alcohol in it. Where are you? None of your business. What do you mean, none of your business? You're my wife, the mother of my child. His voice rose. What the hell are you thinking? Just running off without a word. Me running off? Claire's voice shook with anger. Mark, you're the one who destroyed everything. You're the one who cheated. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. You're right. I was wrong. I'm an asshole. Mark's tone softened, becoming pleading. Claire, I know I messed up. Please come home. I broke it off with her. I swear it's over. Save it for someone who'll believe you. I'm not lying. I had her transferred to another branch. I'll never contact her again. Just give me one more chance. For our daughter's sake, please. At the mention of their child, Claire's eyes filled with tears. She bit her lip, saying nothing. Claire, we've been together for years. We can't just throw it all away, Mark pressed on. I know you're mad. Come home. You can hit me, scream at me, whatever you want. Just don't hide from me like this. I'm not hiding, Claire sniffled. I just need some time to think. Okay. Take your time, Mark said quickly. But can you at least tell me where you are? Are you safe? My parents are worried sick. I'm fine. I'm safe, she said. Just let me be alone for a few days. All right, Mark sighed. When you're ready, call me. I'll come get you. Okay. After hanging up, Claire curled into a ball, burying her face in her knees. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I didn't say anything, just handed her a tissue. She took it and wiped her eyes. He wasn't always like this, she said, her voice muffled. People change, I said. When we first got married, he was wonderful. Thoughtful. A family man, she said, as if talking to herself. When did it all change? I don't know. It was an impossible question. Ethan, she looked up, her eyes red. If it were you, would you ever cheat? I was taken aback. I hadn't expected her to ask that. No, I said. Why not? Because it's a hassle, I said honestly, and it's pointless. She looked at me for a few seconds, then a small smile touched her lips. That's true. You always did hate drama. The tension eased a little. You know, she said, leaning back against the sofa and looking up at the ceiling, sometimes I think marriage is just a big gamble. If you win, you're happy for life. If you lose everything. Yeah, the risk is too high. That's why I never play, I said. What about you? She turned to look at me. Have you ever thought about settling down with someone? I've thought about it, I said. Just never met the right person. What would be the right person? I don't know, I paused. Someone who doesn't feel like a hassle, I guess. She nodded thoughtfully. You should get some sleep, I said, standing up. Don't overthink things. Okay, good night. Good night. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror. What are you doing, Ethan? Playing the supportive best friend? She's a married woman, even if she's on the verge of a divorce. What the hell is this, the two of you living together in this limbo? Once she calms down and thinks things through, she's probably going to go back to him for the kid. And what then? You just watch her leave all over again. I ran my hands through my hair in frustration. This was such a goddamn mess. That weekend, I took her to the river we used to hang out at when we were kids. The river was still there, though the water wasn't as clear, and they'd built a walking path along the banks, turning it into a park. It was full of families and old folks out for a walk. We found an empty bench and sat down. We watched the light glinting off the water, neither of us speaking. Remember? She said suddenly. That one time you fell in, and I had to pull you out. I remember, I laughed. I was trying to get her backpack. Her dad had just bought her a new backpack, and she was obsessed with it. I jokingly tossed it toward the river, but my aim was off. She started crying, and without thinking, I jumped in after it. The water was deeper than I thought, and I almost drowned. She screamed for help until a passerby finally pulled me out. The backpack was lost. She felt guilty about it for weeks. Even back then, I always thought, you were a pain in the ass, but you were a good person, she said. And now, she thought for a moment. I guess not much has changed. Is that a compliment? I suppose. We both smiled. The sun was warm, making me feel lazy. I think I have to go back, she said suddenly. My heart dropped. Have you decided? Yeah, she said, her gaze fixed on the river. Whatever happens, I need to face it. For my daughter and for myself. What are you going to do? We'll talk. If he can really break it off completely. Maybe. She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. For her daughter, she might choose to forgive him. My chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. But I nodded anyway. Okay, as long as you've thought it through. Thank you for these past few days. She looked at me, her expression sincere. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what I would have done. Don't mention it, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. See? She was still choosing to go back. Back to the man who hurt her. For her child, for the sake of a complete family. It was the rational, correct choice. And I was just a temporary safe harbor. Once the storm passed, the ship had to return to its original course. When are you leaving? I asked. Tomorrow, probably, she said. I'll get an early ticket. I'll take you. You don't have to. I can. I'll take you, I insisted. She looked at me, then nodded. Okay. The drive back was quiet, the air heavy with unspoken things. That evening, she said she wanted to eat somewhere nice. We went to a little local joint we used to go to. We ordered a few dishes and a bottle of whiskey. Have a drink. She poured me a glass. Sure. We clinked glasses. One drink, then another. We didn't say much. We just drank. as if the alcohol could suppress whatever we were both feeling. She was a lightweight. After a few glasses, her face was flushed, her eyes a little hazy. "Ethan," she said, propping her chin on her hand and looking at me. "You're a really good guy. You know that?" Giving me the nice guy speech. I laughed. "No." She shook her head. "I mean it. What's so good about me? You're real. You don't put on a show," she said. "It's easy being with you." "That's because we're not actually living together," I said, refilling my glass. "If you were around me every day, you'd be sick of me." "Maybe," she smiled, a sad, distant look in her eyes. "Who knows?" After dinner, we walked back along the old main street. The night air was cool, clearing my head a little. Her steps were unsteady, and I instinctively reached out to steady her arm. She didn't pull away. We walked slowly like that, the street lights stretching our shadows, then shrinking them, then stretching them again. Like any other couple. But I knew it was an illusion. When the sun came up tomorrow, the dream would be over. When we got to my building, she stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to face me. "Ethan," her eyes were shining in the darkness. "If, and I'm just saying if, what if I met you first? Would things have been different?" There was again, if, the most useless word in the English language. I looked at her and said nothing. She looked back at me, as if waiting for an answer. The air felt thick, static. I could hear my own heartbeat, a loud, heavy thudding in my chest. After a long moment, I sighed. "There are no ifs, Claire," I said. The light in her eyes flickered and died. "Yeah." She looked down, forcing a painful smile. "No ifs. I'm going up." She turned and walked up the stairs. I watched her back disappear around the corner. A huge part of me fell hollowed out. I knew that, once again, I had pushed her away with my own 2 hands. Faced with the faintest glimmer of a possibility, I had chosen the safe route, the path of least resistance. "Ethan, you're a coward. A complete and utter coward." The next morning, I drove her to the train station. We were up early, when the sky was just beginning to lighten. She seemed much calmer. Her bag was packed, and she'd put on a little makeup to hide how tired she was. The drive was silent again. We got to the entrance. "This is fine," she said, taking her suitcase from me. "All right. Safe travels. Thanks again for everything." It was nothing. We sounded like 2 polite strangers. She turned and scanned her ticket at the gate. I stood there, watching her back merge with the crowd, getting smaller and smaller. Just as she was about to vanish from sight, she stopped. She turned around and ran back toward me. Before I could react, she wrapped her arms around me in a quick, light hug. It was over in a second, like the brush of feather. "Take care," she whispered in my ear. Then she let go, turned, and disappeared into the crowd for good. I stood there, frozen. The faint scent of her hair lingered in the air. My arms felt empty. My heart felt empty. I knew this was it. This was the real goodbye. Not a physical one, but a final emotional one. She was going back to her life, to patch things up, to compromise. I would go back to my own swamp to wallow and get by. That pitiful, self-deceiving connection between us was finally, completely severed. I stood in the bustling train station and lit a cigarette, watching the fountain in the plaza rise and fall. My mind was strangely calm. It was like something that had been hanging over my head for years had finally crashed to the ground. It hurt like hell, but at least it was solid. At least it was over. Back at my apartment, traces of her were still everywhere. A long strand of her hair on the couch cushion. Her face wash, half-used, on the bathroom counter. I cleaned everything piece by piece. I stripped the bed and threw the sheets in the wash. I opened all the windows to air the place out, trying to erase every sign that she had ever been there. When I was done, I sat in the empty living room. The sun was high in the sky now, its light bright and glaring. My phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "I'm here." "Good," I replied. Another message came through. "Ethan, I'm sorry. And thank you." I stared at the words for a long time. Then, I slowly typed my reply. "Live well. Send." Then, I deleted our entire chat history, along with that 10-year-old message still sitting in my drafts. I wiped it all clean. It felt like a ritual. When it was all done, I leaned back on the couch and closed my eyes. I was exhausted, but in a strange way, I also felt lighter. I knew that I could finally turn the page on the chapter of my life called Clare Jensen. It was a messy, painful turn, but the page was turned. From now on, our paths would probably never cross again. At most, I'd see her updates on Instagram or hear bits of news from my parents. I would know she was in another city, living another life. And that was fine. We both had our own lives to live. Not interfering in each other's was the best ending we could hope for. Outside my window, the sparrows were chirping endlessly. Summer had truly arrived. End of text part 2. Mandatory separators.